Hello everybody, welcome to WhatCulture Gaming. I'm Scott, joined by Josh.
Hello, Scott.
Josh, we might still not have any official PS5 footage from Sony themselves, but it hasn't stopped Epic getting out there and wowing the populace with some lovely little rocks and stuff. So we've got a lot to talk about in regards to the first sort of in-engine gameplay demo of the PS5's SSD hardware running. But initially, what were your reactions to that? Because we've not talked about it. I thought we'd wait until we did this video. How did you find all those lovely rocks?
Scott Tilford, they were the best rocks I've ever seen. I've never been more aroused by a bunch of little rocks in a big cave, to be honest with you. No, I was surprisingly blown away. You know, we've had a lot of these kind of mini reveals over the past few weeks, and while they've been quite good, there's been nothing that's really wowed me. So when it was announced that, you know, Jeff Keighley was hyping up a big reveal last night, I was quite cautious about it. And then when it was announced to be Unreal Engine 5, I was still a bit cautious about it until I actually sat down and watched it in motion. And then I just thought, if I could pre-order a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox One X right now, I would do it, because I'm so excited for this stuff to be in games. You know me, man, we've talked about this at length before, about how the illness that I have when it comes to visuals and graphics and next-gen technology that I barely understand, but I'm here for it, and this got me hype.
So let's break some stuff down. They clarified some terminology. Apparently the engine that they're using, or the technology that they're using for those lovely rocks is called Nanite, and they talked about triangles being the new sort of go-to instead of pixels or voxels, and that there's all these triangles, all these millions and billions of triangles. At one point there's a room with 16 billion triangles in the one room. It's all the one full of all the statues.
It's a lot of triangles,
these
dude.
Triangles. I know. Apparently these triangles are the size of pixels, but when you have that many triangles, I love console people trying to figure out PC stuff, because I don't, none of us know, do we? 1080p. And you just sort of hope for the best. But apparently by interlacing all these triangles together, to the size of pixels, you end up with these hyper dense images, and they refer to them as film quality assets as well. Stuff that you would literally see in big blockbuster films, which is a massive milestone. Because the nearest comparison that I think of is when Ratchet and Clank came out, the game back from 2016. Insomniac shared all their assets with the Ratchet and Clank movie, so that what you were playing was literally the models that they used in the movie as well. Which it feels like we've kind of got there finally with console tech, that you'll literally be playing through environments or with character models and assets that are as good as Hollywood, which I guess is a pretty massive milestone.
Well, amazing, because we kind of get parts of that now. You know, when in a big game, say in Uncharted, when the camera zooms in and you have a cutscene, that's all rendered in-game, but it uses the higher fidelity models, obviously, because it's up close and personal. But this essentially sounds like those high-end models, those cinematic resolutions and those cinematic renders are just being used throughout the game on little details like rocks that are in the background. You know what I mean? The ability to not have to tone those things down or kind of, limit them when you're actually in the game. And that's the exciting thing for me, because it does up the detail massively. Like, I'm playing The Witcher 3 through again, and it's completely great. It's so good. We did a really good podcast that you should watch over on the WhatCulture channel. But the thing that I noticed when playing that game is that it's so big and it's so beautiful still to this day, but you can sort of see the tricks that the developers are using while they're making such a kind of believable world. You can see that when you're walking through a dense forest, it's so dense because they can only render so far in front of them. Once you get to a wide open space, the detail completely tanks. And this is what we were talking about in the podcast we were doing on Monday, you know what I mean? When you don't have those limitations in play, it opens up so many possibilities. It makes the gaming experience far more immersive, because you're not noticing where the seams have been threaded together, you know what I mean? Like it means you don't have to have those dense forests to hide the fact that the world isn't entirely rendered when you're walking through, you know what I mean? Because everything, according to this gameplay demo and everything that Sony has said with the SSD, it makes that possible. It makes the fact that you can render these cinematic quality textures throughout the entire game, throughout the entire environment. So like at the end of the demo when we saw the woman jump from the top of the
when it became Gravity
cave.
Rush.
When it became Gravity Rush and she went down to the portal, everything was there, you know what I mean? And if they can fulfill that potential in actual games, and this becomes more than just, a vertical slice of what could be. Dude, I'm here for it. I'm so excited.
I'm gonna read you a lovely quote because everything that they've shown off is literally in engine, running on PS5. Jeff Keighley got out there and confirmed it alongside Epic's Tim Sweeney. But there is a quote from Tim Sweeney who was talking to Cena, comparing the PS5's architecture to the highest end PCs right now. And he said that as far as where they are right now, they're optimizing for next generation storage to make loading faster by multiples of current performance. Which literally it's going to be the SSD is going to change everything. If you can get rid of loading times, get rid of streaming times, texture pop in, all that stuff, and just have a game that can read the data as fast as you can play it, then that opens so much stuff up, even down to the literal philosophy of game design, of level design, because you could do whatever you want, and you don't have to have some awkward corridor section or crevice section, as I'll get back to in this demo, where someone has to awkwardly go through again, which I'm sick of seeing in every AAA game. And back to his quote, though. Oh God! As soon as I saw that, I went, "Oh, it's just next generation, is it? You've still got someone just ambling through." But anyway, we'll get back to that. Yes, Mr. Tim Sweeney talking about different multiples of current performance. He said you can bring in this geometry and display it despite it not all fitting in memory, taking advantage of next generation SSD architecture and everything else. He said that Sony's pioneering that with the PS5 architecture. It's got a god tier storage system, which is pretty far ahead of PCs. Which I mean, will it not? I haven't talked to Mr. Rich Hudson yet, but he's our go-to comparison for PC stuff. As far as I know, I think this is the first time that consoles have overtaken PC, or at least in quite some time, because it was always the case, especially this generation, that even when the systems launched, they were already behind the current PC tech. But him comparing two PCs and saying that this SSD is this miracle thing. I mean, the Xbox Series X also has an SSD, but I guess in terms of how this would affect game design and general architecture and stuff like that, how would you come down on, or what do you think of these thoughts that we're actually getting something that is possibly the best game playing thing on the market overall?
That's the fascinating thing, and it's the thing I've been following. I've been following developers and publishers talking about the SSD and talking about how revolutionary it is. And obviously we've only got their word to go on, and obviously they're going to hype up their partners and stuff. But if what they're saying is true, and it does bring in a revolution that we haven't seen before. Like we mentioned it again on the podcast, but that's the most exciting thing, to see these limitations lifted, to see something that we haven't seen in gaming for a while, which is radical new ways to make games. Because I know one of the biggest criticisms that I know you have, especially Scott, about the current generation, is that there's nothing really fundamentally that we've got this generation that we couldn't have played last generation from a mechanical standpoint. Not really. There's very few things. Obviously, we've had new genres with Battle Royale and live service and stuff, but the way that games are made has remained fundamentally the same. They've gotten bigger, they've gotten prettier, but we haven't had an explosion of new ideas. And what everyone seems to be saying about this SSD is that it's going to bring in that explosion of new ideas and stuff. And you mentioned the comparison to PC, which is obviously very apt. PC has always been ahead of consoles. And that's the thing that PC players always talk about, you know what I mean? Well, this technology isn't new.
Can't get rich to shut up about it.
You can't get rich to shut up about it. This technology isn't new. SSDs aren't new. But I don't think it's necessarily the point about whether or not the tech's new or not. It's how the tech is implemented. PCs, high-end PCs might have these features already built in, or similar features already built in. But that's almost meaningless if developers aren't making use of them and developers don't have that as a baseline. We saw it with, Crysis back in the day. That game was a complete, revolution in terms of graphics and processing power and everything. There was a whole thing of, can your PC even play Crysis? And for most people, the answer was no. And that was great. But the problem is, because only a few people could get the most out of Crysis, and meant that tech wasn't used everywhere. It meant that a few select people got to get the most out of that game, and then the things that are brought in were widely ignored for a good few years by regular game makers. But the thing about the SSD, which is so exciting, is that Sony have clearly custom built it to be the core of their next generation of machines, which means that it's going to be capitalized on not only by first-party studios, but third-party studios. So if this is kind of the baseline, it means that now everyone is going to make the most of it. Now games are going to be shaped around it. It's not just a thing that a few titles are going to make the most of, you know what I mean? Like it currently is in the PC tech. We saw it with Tomb Raider 2013. Remember, with the hair technology, and that was a big thing about
effects.
Tress effects, and that was a big thing on PC. And it looked really cool. It worked really well, but the problem was only a handful of people could actually use it, so it didn't impact the gaming industry as a whole from like a mainstream level. And that is the key difference. You know what I mean? These things might not be new. but the way that they're being implemented will make them feel like they're new. It will properly harness the power, hopefully, across consoles.
Yeah. I mean, I'm fascinated about how this affects, like I said, the general philosophy of game design going forward. One thing I picked out, though, is that towards the end, they say that the release date, that all this technology is rolling out as of 2021. So that's still going to take a few years after that for that to be implemented into game dev cycles. If you take the average, game development cycle as 3 to 5 years. Obviously, the indie scene, I don't think they've priced this yet, because Unreal Engine 4 went free over time. And that sort of raised the bar or allowed the other indie games to, present more gorgeous visuals and things like that.
Yeah.
So there is kind of like a delayed rollout to this stuff where it looks amazing. But as far as, PS5 launch stuff goes or Xbox Series X launch stuff goes, it's not going to be using this technology. The developers aren't even going to get their hands on it until next year. So I kind of just picked that out as we're going to see stuff be more incredible going forward. But just as I don't know if people are going to be expecting this level of stuff from later this year. But the Epic did also mention that this gameplay demo was intended to be shown off at GDC. So the PS5's been capable of running this for, I guess, like a month or a couple of months at this point. But to go back to that crevices thing and talk about the design philosophies of video games, what was your reaction to that? Because those crevice sections exist in the majority of games to hide loading times, to let you buffer something ahead of time. And I guess my question is, would you rather have those sections or just have a loading screen?
Well, right, this is the, well, I keep saying this is the interesting thing. I say it in every single video and I'm sick of saying it, to be honest. I'm going to try not to say that for the rest
1975
of this video. But when it comes to stuff like the crevice things, which usually hide load times, I wonder whether the case is that might not be there in this case to hide a load or whatever. It might just be there because that style of development and that style of transition has been beaten into developers over the past 10 years, that it's just kind of muscle memory. It's like, oh, well, we need to have one of these sections because that's just what action games, third-person action games have now. And I think there's going to be a lot of, I think Mark Cerny might have even mentioned it, or someone might have mentioned it when he did the big talk about the SSD, and he mentioned that although these limitations will be lifted, it's up to developers to kind of unlearn those behaviors, because it must be second nature to them to build a level in a specific way that makes that's informed by the limitations, or put in a crevice section to get to a different loading screen. So I don't think that the new technology will see them just go overnight, because it has become such a routine part of game development that they're going to have to take a step back and go, hang on, do we actually need this? Is this fun? Are we doing this because it's fun, or were we doing this because we needed to do it to hide a loading screen? You know what I mean? So that's my best case scenario.
I think just those things have just emerged over time as a way to, I think it's just, I don't know what people generally think of the difference between loading screens and trying to mask stuff. Because for me, it's just super obvious, and I would rather have the Rockstar approach, where you just have a front-loaded, or Naughty Dog's approach, where you have a front-loaded load screen that maybe takes a little while, but the game is just there afterwards, and you can just play for as long as you want. Personally, I would always take that. But I kind of wonder whether maybe focus testing over time has led to, because so many devs do it, that you have to assume there's some sort of internal mandate or widespread conversations between devs, just saying well, look, we need to find some way of getting around loading times, and we're going to go with this crevice-based thing, which for me is just so noticeable of every character sort of slowly getting through a section, where the game can box everything off. There's, for as much as even God of War is one giant take, there's one bit when you're down in hell where you have to just randomly go through an S-shaped corridor so the camera can zoom all the way in to load the next bit. And those things I always feel kind of stick out. But yeah, like you said, it's the possibilities are there. It's just that game devs are going to be able to experiment with that stuff going forward. So yeah, that, I think, considering how little there is to show off for the PS5, this kind of came out of nowhere and obviously got everybody talking. So the buzz is still there for the system. It's just that Sony could do with capitalizing on it with some first party stuff. If the rumors are correct, then we're apparently going to see more on June 4th. So I guess we'll see. But yeah, let us know what you think down in the comments below of the footage that they've shown so far, and what do you want to see from Sony's first party studios going forward. For now, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com.
I've been Josh from WhatCulture.com.
I'll catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.